In the quiet town of Tingley, England, an eerie and puzzling incident came to light that left investigators utterly perplexed. The story revolves around Zygmunt Adamski, who vanished under inexplicable circumstances, only to reappear lifeless atop a heap of coal a few days later. With perplexing marks and a complex web of mystery surrounding his fate, the enigmatic case of Zygmunt Adamski continues to confound investigators and spark theories of otherworldly involvement. Let's journey over to the charming village of Tingley, situated in the picturesque West Yorkshire countryside of England. Here lives Zygmunt Adamski, a coal miner. Originally hailing from Poland, Zygmunt spent much of his early life in his home country. However, in 1960, at the age of 37, he and his wife Lottie made a life-altering choice to move to the United Kingdom, seeking a fresh beginning together. Upon their arrival, Zygmunt and Lottie swiftly formed new connections and seamlessly embraced the tranquil pace of life in a rural English small town. They were known for their contentment as a couple, never seeking conflict and always radiating joy. Yet, no one could have foreseen the perplexing sequence of events that would unfold. Even today, the circumstances surrounding his case remain unresolved, leaving behind a multitude of unanswered queries and an enduring sense of fascination. On the bright afternoon of June 6, 1980, Zygmunt, then 56 years old, left his residence on foot with a simple task at hand: to purchase groceries from a nearby store. Before setting off on his approximately 1-mile journey to the town, he engaged in a friendly conversation with one of his neighbors. Taking in the pleasant ambience of that serene summer day, everything seemed entirely ordinary at the time. However, neither Zygmunt or his spouse, nor anyone familiar with him, could have anticipated that this would mark the final occasion they would ever see him alive. Zygmunt didn't come back after heading out to get groceries. He seemingly disappeared, except for a significant twist. About a week later, Zygmunt reappeared, and things were far from normal. It was 5 days later, on June 11th, that a startling revelation took place. Zygmunt's lifeless body was discovered in a coal yard located in Todmorden, a considerable distance of more than 20 miles from his home. Trevor Parker, the son of the coal yard proprietor, inadvertently stumbled upon this tragic scene. It happened at around 3:45 p.m., while Trevor was opening the gates of the compound to prepare for his afternoon shift. His eyes fell upon a man's body resting atop a towering 12-foot heap of coal. Recognizing the gravity of the situation immediately, Trevor wasted no time and promptly notified the authorities. The police officer who received the call was Constable Alan Godfrey of the West Yorkshire Police. As he hurried to the scene, he must have been quite taken aback by the dispatcher's report of a body found on a pile of coal. Definitely an unusual call for this otherwise tranquil region of England. So around 4:10 p.m., Constable Godfrey arrived at the coal yard and met with Trevor Parker, who directed him to the massive coal heap. Once Godfrey observed the clearly deceased man on top, he requested additional support and backup from officers, crime scene technicians, and the Criminal Investigation Department. Like any police inquiry, initial statements were collected. In this case, the first statement was taken from Trevor Parker, considering he stumbled upon this unsettling scene. However, his responses were baffling, to say the least. Upon being questioned, Trevor shared that he had last been to the coal yard around 11 a.m. on that same morning. He emphasized that during his previous visit, there had been no sign of Zygmunt Adamski's lifeless body. His answers raised more questions than they answered. Parker firmly asserted that he had diligently closed and secured the gates when he left, with no awareness of anyone else entering the premises since then. This disclosure hinted at a disconcerting possibility that the body might have appeared within the span of those 5 hours in between. Constable Godfrey wasted no time and promptly summoned an ambulance upon his arrival at the scene. Paramedics swiftly concluded that Adamski had experienced a massive cardiac arrest. Yet, upon closer examination of the circumstances surrounding his passing, a series of suspicious elements began to come to light. These foreboding factors prompted the authorities to consider the potential involvement of foul play. The plot thickens as the investigation delves into even more unsettling details. Firstly, and perhaps most disturbing of all, were the findings of second-degree burn marks on the back of Zigman's neck and shoulders. These burns were curiously covered with a green-like gel substance, raising the unsettling possibility that someone had attempted to treat these wounds while Zigman was still alive. Secondly, the manner in which Zigman was discovered, along with his overall state of his lifeless body, cast significant doubt on the idea of a death caused by natural factors. The circumstances simply didn't align with a peaceful passing. Several pieces of the puzzle, along with Parker's statement, remained confounding. An eerie and puzzling detail emerged concerning the peculiar state of Adamski's attire. It seemed as though his clothing had been hastily rearranged by an unfamiliar hand, almost as if someone with little knowledge of dressing a human being had clumsily tried to redress him after his demise. For example, his coat was buttoned up incorrectly. His trousers and belt were fastened improperly and left loose, almost as if they had been pulled on without being properly secured. Even his shoes were left untied. To add to the puzzle, Adamski's wife later revealed that the shirt he had been wearing on that day of his disappearance was now missing, along with his wallet and watch. So they had dressed him anew, but decided not to include his shirt. Despite the disorder of his clothing, it was significant that the general condition of his attire remained relatively intact. This finding effectively dismissed the possibility that he had been living outdoors or exposed to the harsh conditions during the 5 days that he was missing. This perplexing blend of meticulously cared for clothes combined with incorrect reassembly only heightened the overall mystery. Continuing to pile on to the peculiarities, one of the most bewildering aspects was the impeccable cleanliness of Adamski's body. It was as though he had just emerged from a refreshing shower, despite having been absent for nearly a whole week. Remarkably, he exhibited only a day's worth of stubble growth. What added to the astonishment was the complete absence of coal dust on his skin or his attire. This effectively eliminated the possibility that he had climbed onto the coal heap on his own power before succumbing to his heart attack. Lastly, and perhaps the most perplexing of all, was the total lack of footprints or indications of disturbances on the coal pile itself. No trace existed of anyone scaling it, or any indication that it had been tampered with in any manner. Zigman's lifeless form lay on his back, his face oriented towards the sky. The scene left a chilling impression, as if he had been dropped from above, causing investigators to grapple with the puzzling circumstances surrounding where he was found. The puzzle grew even more intricate with each unanswered question, leaving those engaged in the investigation both baffled and concerned. Godfrey proceeded to share a chilling detail, the expression of terror etched onto Adamski's contorted face. This unsettling observation was subsequently supported by the coroner's findings, which indicated that Adamski must have undergone intense fear or agony in his final moments. Based on the post-mortem examination, it was established that Mr. Adamski met his unfortunate end between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. on that very Wednesday, when his lifeless body was discovered. Surprisingly, it was unveiled that Adamski had consumed food adequately during his period of absence, barring the day of his passing. This raised further intrigue, as it appears he had been taken care of during the time he was unaccounted for. Furthermore, forensic analysis unveiled that the burn marks on his neck and shoulders had been inflicted just 2 days prior to his death. The enigmatic gel-like substance applied to these burns underwent testing at a home office laboratory, yet its exact composition remains elusive. Interestingly, there was no record of Adamski seeking such treatment at any local hospital. As the investigation continued to unfold, no clear motive or discernible reason for Adamski's abrupt disappearance could be ascertained. The puzzle's complexity deepened with each revelation, leaving investigators and the community mystified, eager to unveil the truth behind this eerie and unresolved occurrence. Adamski was widely recognized for his benevolent nature, holding no known adversaries or grudges. His mental state was stable, and he had been eagerly anticipating attending a family wedding scheduled for the day following his enigmatic vanishing. As word of this case got out, it carried a series of peculiar elements that simply couldn't be disregarded. Speculation concerning the potential involvement of extraterrestrial abduction began to spread, gaining momentum with the tabloids in the ensuing weeks. While such ideas may seem far-fetched, it proves challenging to entirely dismiss them, given the uncanny circumstances surrounding Adamski's demise. Todmorden and its nearby regions have gained notoriety as a hotspot for UFO sightings and unexplained occurrences. The intricate nature of this hypothesis gains further traction due to the captivating involvement of Alan Godfrey, who later found himself at the heart of his own alleged alien abduction account. Telling the story of Zigman Adamski would be incomplete without delving into the parallel experience of Alan Godfrey, as these two narratives have become indelibly intertwined over time. The convergence of their story weaves a fabric of mystery and fascination that extends beyond conventional explanations. The eerie links between Adamski's disappearance and the realm of extraterrestrial encounters have captured the imagination of those drawn into the enigmatic. As we delve into their interconnected tales, we embark on a journey that challenges our perception and urges us to question the boundaries of our understanding. In November of 1980, approximately 6 months after the discovery of Adamski's lifeless body, another peculiar event unfolded. On duty in the early morning hours, Alan Godfrey responded to a peculiar report of a baffling phenomena. Eyewitnesses recounted observing a group of cows appearing and vanishing in various spots across the local council estate. Driving along Burnley Road towards the location of the latest sighting, Godfrey's attention was caught by what initially seemed to be an overturned double-decker bus roughly 200 meters ahead. It was beyond belief. Fearing a potential catastrophic incident involving a shift bus for local coal miners, anticipating the worst, he cautiously reduced his speed to assess the situation. However, as his police vehicle drew nearer to the scene, he quickly realized that it wasn't a bus at all, and whatever it was, it hovered above the ground. The object that confronted the police officer defied all logic and explanation. He could hardly come to terms with what he was witnessing. It was like something straight out of a science fiction movie, unfolding right before his eyes. He would later describe the object's shape as more akin to a diamond than a typical cigar or a disc form. The object emitted bright lights as it hovered, measuring about 20 feet in height and about 14 feet in width, spinning silently in the air. Confusion and fear gripped him. His immediate instinct was to call for backup for numerous reasons, primarily to have additional witnesses to this incredible sight. Godfrey attempted to request backup using both his personal radio and the police radio in his vehicle, only to find that they were inexplicably non-functional. With no immediate assistance available, he was left with an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. Determined to gather evidence and document this otherworldly encounter, he quickly noted the time and hastily sketched the peculiar craft. He managed to sketch the object he was observing in roughly 30 seconds. However, as he completed his sketch and lifted his eyes, the strange craft had vanished into thin air. Searching the surroundings for any lingering traces of the craft, he made a chilling and concerning discovery. His patrol car had inexplicably advanced along the road, covering nearly a quarter mile from its initial position. Perplexed by this strange occurrence, he glanced at his watch, only to be confronted with another unsettling realization. Despite the sensation that only a minute had passed, almost 30 minutes of time had vanished, leaving an unaccounted for gap in his recollection. To intensify the disconcerting nature of this incident, Godfrey would later make yet another unsettling discovery. The soles of his standard-issue police boots displayed signs of splitting at the toe, as though he had been pulled along the ground by an unforeseen force. Shortly after this encounter, Alan Godfrey returned to the police station, driven to seek help from his colleagues in locating the missing cattle. Together, they embarked on a search that led them to a rain-soaked field accessible solely through a securely locked gate. Despite the soft ground resulting from recent heavy rainfall, no traces of hoof prints could be discerned. Much like Zigman Adamski, it appeared though as the cows had been inexplicably placed into the field. Following standard procedure, Godfrey reported his morning encounter with the strange object. Astoundingly, he uncovered that another driver, 3 miles further down the same road, had also witnessed the enigmatic white light and reported it to the Todmorden police. Weeks transpired without further incidents until an unfortunate turn of events unfolded. News of Godfrey's encounter with the strange craft somehow leaked to the press, thrusting him and his department into a whirlwind of embarrassment and scrutiny. Despite his status as an exemplary officer, having received 2 commendations for his past police work, Godfrey found himself marginalized by his peers and gradually losing favor with his superiors. His once promising career was shattered, and he eventually made the tough choice to depart from the police force. Years later, Godfrey engaged in multiple sessions of hypnotic regression, a method that allowed him to recall his otherworldly encounter in more vivid detail. Under hypnosis, Godfrey recollected being blinded by the light and subsequently losing consciousness. He told the hypnotist that upon awakening, he found himself in a strange room, being examined by several small creatures and a tall humanoid figure with a beard. Once more, his assertions were met with skepticism and ridicule. As I previously mentioned, due to his treatment by fellow officers and superiors, he decided to quit the police force. Would this be enough for you to leave your career? Several weeks after Godfrey's account had leaked to the newspapers and gained international attention, he was summoned to his inspector's office. There sat an individual in a dark suit and tie who introduced himself as the man from the ministry. Holding a file, he displayed Godfrey's sketch of the peculiar craft. While Godfrey was not allowed to see the remaining contents, he summarized that it likely contained his comprehensive report of the strange events from that day, along with the details of Zigman Adamski's death. The individual instructed Godfrey to take an oath under the Official Secrets Act, binding him to silence regarding what he had witnessed. Reluctantly, Godfrey consented. Over the ensuing days, the young policeman encountered this individual on multiple occasions, becoming aware of him being shadowed. Ultimately, Godfrey confronted the man at his local pub, firmly expressing his desire for him to depart. Shortly after that confrontation, the mysterious man disappeared, never to be seen again. The identity of this enigmatic figure remains a mystery to this day. Godfrey believes he might have been an agent of MI5, dispatched to dissuade him from pursuing this matter. Another theory proposes that the stranger could have been a representative of the West Yorkshire Police, sent to warn off Godfrey against speaking to the media in order to prevent further attention being drawn to the force, already grappling with significant negative publicity due to the Yorkshire Ripper case, or perhaps he was one of the infamous Men in Black. When later recounting the enigmatic case of Zigman Adamski, Godfrey openly acknowledged that it was one of the most perplexing assignments he had ever encountered. Reflecting on his own experiences, he remained uncertain about the roles of UFOs in Adamski's fate, although he refrained from entirely dismissing the possibility. Fast forward 25 years, and researchers from the British UFO Research Association and other organizations conducted interviews with Adamski's family members, uncovering intriguing revelations. Contrary to prior reports, it was revealed that Adamski hadn't been eagerly anticipating his goddaughter's wedding. In reality, a profound family rift had occurred during that time. A female relative had temporarily taken refuge with the Adamski family after obtaining a restraining order against her own husband. This led to considerable animosity between the two sides of the family, a common outcome during tumultuous separations. Given these newfound details, 2 main theories arose again regarding Mr. Adamski's whereabouts during those 5 days. On one hand, some speculate that he was forcibly abducted by the estranged husband of the female relative, held captive in an isolated shed, and subjected to torment, including the application of battery acid. This prolonged ordeal eventually led to his fatal heart attack. In a state of panic, the estranged husband may have quickly disposed of Adamski's lifeless body at the coalyard, attempting to conceal his hedonist crime. However, this theory seems inadequate due to the myriad of elements in this case that don't align with it. It's puzzling why Adamski, seemingly neutral in the family dispute, would have been singled out for abduction. What purpose would his kidnapping have served? Moreover, the state of undress in which he was found adds another layer of intrigue. Why was he undressed? And what was the mysterious substance discovered on his skin? If his captor had intended to harm him, as suggested by the burn marks, why apply the substance? These perplexing details only deepen the mystery. Furthermore, the decision to place Adamski's body on top of a coal pile in broad daylight raises questions. Remember, his body wasn't at the location at 11 a.m., but was discovered there 5 hours later, in the middle of the afternoon. Why not hide it in a less conspicuous spot, at a less noticeable time of day? How did the person responsible for disposing of the body gain access to the coalyard without leaving any traces? These inquiries underscore the intricacies of the case and the necessity for a more thorough examination of the circumstances surrounding Adamski's disappearance and subsequent discovery. As we delve into the layers of this narrative, the uncertainties and unexplained elements remain captivating. A meticulous analysis of the facts, careful exploration of the alternative theories, and a steadfast pursuit of the truth are the avenues through which we may inch closer to unveiling the hidden mysteries within the Zigman Adamski case. The lack of arrest or charges connected to the abduction introduces another layer of intrigue. It's evident that this theory falls significantly short of providing definitive answers. Consequently, many individuals turn their attention to the potential involvement of extraterrestrial forces. Is it conceivable that Adamski was somehow taken by beings beyond our world? According to this line of thought, Adamski could have been abducted by extraterrestrials on June 6th as he headed to the local grocery store. It's theorized that he might have been held in a state of suspended animation, which would account for the lack of facial hair growth and his healthy appearance upon his return. Perhaps he was intermittently brought in and out of a suspended state for examination or other purposes. Overwhelmed by the shock of his encounters with the otherworldly phenomena, it's assumed that Adamski suffered a severe cardiac arrest, ultimately leading to his premature passing. Contemplating the potential involvement of UFOs gives rise to a multitude of inquiries. Were these extraterrestrial entities conducting experiments or observing Adamski for an enigmatic purpose? What could have motivated his abduction? And if these beings from beyond were indeed responsible, how can one reconcile the particular circumstances surrounding the discovery of his body and the ensuing investigation? From within the enveloping Zigman Adamski vanishing, a chilling detail surfaces. It came to light Adamski's cherished possessions, symbols of his identity, had vanished alongside with him. For what intent might extraterrestrial beings have sought his coveted wallet and watch? Strikingly, most accounts of alien abduction scenarios hinted at an alternate narrative, although the experiences were undoubtedly terrifying and sometimes accompanied by an unsettling physical sensation. The abductors themselves were often depicted as somewhat benign, lacking harsh intentions toward their subjects. This leaves us to ponder, why did Adamski bear the marks of burns that appear to be intentionally inflicted? Could these have been unintentional actions on the part of his captors? And if so, what peculiar substance did they employ, as its chemical composition defied identification by contemporary science? Perhaps the most perplexing facet of this mystifying ordeal was how Adamski was unceremoniously abandoned atop a heap of coal, illuminated by the glaring daylight. Why would his captors opt for such a brazen act, forsaking the shadows where the secrets of their potentially malicious deeds could have remained concealed? Was there perhaps a hint of remorse at their conscience, compelling them to return him to his home and his loved ones? Regardless of our perspective, the Zigman Adamski destiny remains unresolved. While the plausible narrative of a family feud might provide a partial explanation, it falls short of being totally conclusive. Indeed, we should not dismiss the prospect of an alternative hypothesis, no matter how fantastic or out of this world they may appear. The truth, it seems, evades us. A phantom relegated to the pages of history, yet another unsolved case that time has forgotten. If you've enjoyed this content from a universe of mystery, please like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my new and upcoming videos. Welcome back to a universe of mystery. On today's episode, we'll delve into the tragic story of Jody Zetchik and Gerald Duran, a couple who attempted to hike the Pacific Coast Trail, or PCT for short, in the winter of 1983. Their decision to take on the treacherous winter conditions led to a fateful event that ultimately cost them their lives. Jody Zetchik and Gerald Duran were a young, adventurous couple who shared a love for the outdoors. In 1983, they decided to take on the ambitious challenge of hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, a 2,650-mile-long trail that stretches from the United States-Mexico border in California to the United States-Canadian border in Washington. The trail generally takes around 5 months to complete, and many hikers choose to hike it during the warmer months. However, Jody and Gerald made the fateful decision to attempt the trail during the winter. Jody and Gerald set off on their winter adventure. Beginning at the northern end of the trail in Washington, they planned to travel south towards Wrightwood, California, where they would stock up on supplies before continuing their journey. As they made their way down the trail, they encountered freezing temperatures, snowstorms, and treacherous terrain. Despite these challenges, the couple pressed on, determined to complete their quest. As Jody and Gerald neared Wrightwood, they made a critical error. They mistakenly descended into the wrong canyon, leading them into much steeper terrain than they anticipated or prepared for. As they continued downward, the already dangerous conditions grew worse, with icy slopes making the descent even more treacherous. As the couple tried to navigate the icy slopes, tragedy struck. They slipped on the ice, losing their footing and falling close to 100 feet down a steep incline. The fall proved to be fatal for both Jody and Gerald, and their dream of conquering the Pacific Crest Trail during the winter came to a tragic end. On December 3, 1983, search and rescue teams located the body of Jody and Gerald. The efforts to find them had been difficult, as the winter conditions made the search area even more dangerous for the rescuers. The terrain, combined with the weather, had created an environment where accidents were all too common. The tragic loss of Jody and Gerald serves as a somber reminder of the risks associated with taking on extreme outdoor adventures. Their story highlights the importance of proper planning, knowledge of the terrain, and respect for the environment, especially when faced with harsh winter conditions. In the wake of Jody and Gerald's tragic deaths, the hiking community has learned several lessons. One is the importance of knowing one's limits and being aware of the dangers associated with undertaking a challenging hike like the Pacific Crest Trail in the wintertime. Additionally, proper preparation and planning are crucial, as the couple's decision to descend into the wrong canyon ultimately led to their demise. Another lesson from Jody and Gerald's story is the importance of having the right safety gear and training for the conditions encountered on a hike. In this case, the couple would have benefited from equipment such as crampons, ice axes, and ropes, which could have helped them navigate the icy slopes more safely. Furthermore, training and mountaineering skills could have potentially saved their lives. Jody and Gerald's tragic end serves as a reminder of the immense power of nature and the need to respect it. While the allure of conquering a challenging hike like the Pacific Crest Trail in winter can be tempting, it is essential to remember that nature can be unforgiving, especially during harsh conditions. The story reinforces the importance of making well-informed decisions when embarking on any outdoor adventure, taking into account the potential risks and preparing accordingly. Although their story ended in tragedy, Jody and Gerald's ambitious attempt to hike the Pacific Crest Trail in winter has left a lasting impact on the hiking community. Their story has inspired others to push their limits, while also serving as a cautionary tale about the importance of proper preparation, respecting nature, and making informed decisions. Since Jody and Gerald's ill-fated journey, the Pacific Crest Trail has continued to grow in popularity, attracting hikers from all over the world. While most still choose to hike the trail during the warmer months, their story has not deterred a select few from attempting the trail during the winter. Those who do, however, are now more likely to be better prepared, thanks in part to the lessons learned from Jody and Gerald's tragic end. Now, we'll dive into the unsolved mystery of Kris Sherpa Fowler, an experienced hiker who vanished while attempting to complete the Pacific Crest Trail in 2016. Join us as we unravel the details of his disappearance, the ongoing search efforts, and the relentless determination of his stepmother to bring him home. Kris Fowler, a 34-year-old outdoorsman from Ohio, embarked on an adventure of a lifetime in 2016. He set out to hike the PCT, a 2,650-mile trail that stretches from Mexico to Canada, traversing diverse landscapes from desert to mountain ranges. Kris began his journey well prepared, training with a friend in Colorado and planning for packages to be sent to multiple checkpoints along the trail. He started the hike with his friend, but they agreed to separate if their pace changed. Along the way, Kris earned the trail name Sherpa and regularly checked in with his family and friends. On October 12, 2016, with less than 400 miles left to complete the PCT, Kris disappeared. He was last seen at a Cracker Barrel in White Press, Washington, where he stopped for coffee before heading back to the trail. His phone was shut off about an hour later, and he was never seen again. When Kris's parents realized they hadn't heard from him in 3 weeks, they contacted authorities, friends, and fellow hikers. The Yakima County Sheriff's Office began an extensive search, eventually concluding that Kris had likely been caught in a powerful storm unprepared and succumbed to the elements or hypothermia. Despite the official conclusion, many theories have circulated about Kris's fate. Some believe he intentionally disappeared, while others suggest he fell victim to an animal attack or foul play. However, no solid evidence has been found to support any of these theories. Sally Fowler, Kris's stepmother, had dedicated herself to finding her son. She had retraced his steps, organized search efforts, and used social media to share his story. Through her dedication, she became a vital member of the hiking community, advocating for safety measures and helping families of other missing hikers. In collaboration with the family of another missing PCT hiker, David O'Sullivan, Sally co-founded the Fowler O'Sullivan Foundation. The foundation helps families of missing hikers navigate the search process, connects them to resources, and supports initiatives to prevent future missing hiker cases. Despite years of searching, Kris Fowler remains missing. His stepmother and the hiking community continue to hold on to the hope that he may still be found. If you have any information about Kris's case, please contact the Yakima County Sheriff's Office at 509-574-2535. Now we'll explore the mysterious disappearance of Christopher Sylvia, an experienced hiker who vanished while hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. We'll be taking a close look at the details surrounding his disappearance, discussing the search efforts that took place, and pondering the possibilities of what could have happened to him. Kris Sylvia was a 28-year-old hiker who was last seen on February 16, 2015, wearing brown hiking boots, a dark-colored jacket, and green pants. He had set out on the Pacific Crest Trail from Anza, California on February 12, 2015. On February 16th, he called his friend and roommate, Min Kim, to schedule a supply pickup near Warner Springs at the Buddhist Temple in northern San Diego County on Chickawa Valley Road. Kris never arrived at the agreed-upon location, and his friend did not report him missing until February 24th, when he was expected to reach his final destination. On February 24th, hikers found a sleeping bag, sleeping pad, and backpack that appeared to belong to Kris, as well as his ID, approximately 13 miles off Highway 79, north of Warner Springs. The San Diego Sheriff's Office called off the search for Kris on March 3, 2015, due to weather conditions. He had been missing for 2 weeks at that time. It's important to note that this is not the type of terrain that could easily hide a body. There are mountain lions in the area, but they are shy animals that generally avoid human contact. This case is quite puzzling. Kris wouldn't have gone far from his gear, and given the extensive search efforts, it's highly unlikely that he fell over or became incapacitated without being found. There's no evidence of crime against hikers being an issue in this part of the Pacific Crest Trail, and the distance from the border makes it improbable that he might have run across drug smugglers. One theory, as posted on an online forum, Find Kris Sylvia Missing Hiker Group, suggests that Kris might have gotten off the trail near Tool Springs and stayed at the Anza RV park for a couple of days. He could have met up with a camp host named Earl, who was known for being friendly towards hikers, and might have given Kris a ride to the Chickawa Valley Road to continue his hike. Unfortunately, Earl has since passed away, so this theory remains unconfirmed. Kris's mother, Nancy Sylvia, believes that foul play could be involved in her son's disappearance. All 5 of her children are experienced hikers, and she finds it highly unusual that Kris will go hiking alone and leave his gear behind. Min Kim, Kris's roommate, said all we can really do is hope he's okay and try to remember as many positive moments as we can with him. Despite the years that have passed, Kris's loved ones still search for answers and hope to someday learn the truth behind his disappearance. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Kris Stevens Sylvia, please contact the San Diego Sheriff's Department at 858-565-5200. Your help could provide much-needed closure for Kris's family and friends, who continue to hold on to hope that they will find out what happened to him. As we reflect on the puzzling nature of Kris's case, it's crucial to remember the importance of staying safe and prepared while embarking on outdoor adventures. Even experienced hikers like Kris can encounter unexpected situations, and it's vital to have a plan in place for communication, supplies, and emergencies. The mysterious disappearance of Kris Sylvia remains an unsolved case, leaving many unanswered questions. Theories have been proposed, but no concrete evidence has emerged to explain what happened to Kris on that fateful hike. His loved ones are left with memories and an unwavering determination to uncover the truth. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, and share. Your support helps us continue to investigate and share the stories of missing persons. In today's story, we will be discussing the mysterious disappearance of Gail Stewart, a 64-year-old Reno, Nevada woman who went missing on Valentine's Day, February 14th of 2022. Gail Stewart had been missing since 10 a.m. when her son could not get in touch with her and decided to call some friends to help locate the missing woman. One of her son's friends had a feeling that Stewart was in a certain area and decided to ascend a hiking trail in the Coughlin Range outside of Reno. Authorities described this area as a fairly common area for local hikers with numerous dirt roads to walk along. However, Stewart was discovered on the side of a steep slope, an area where hikers typically don't venture. It remains unclear how the 64-year-old ended up on the dangerous cliff, but it's believed she may have fallen down a slope before grabbing onto a tree and clinging to it. In a dramatic twist, a small search party of friends and family members found her roughly 300 to 400 feet from the road. A rescue team, which consisted of about 28 people, arrived at about 9:15 p.m. that evening and spent roughly 30 minutes pulling Stewart to safety. At the time of her rescue, Stewart was unresponsive and suffering from hypothermia. Officials also reported that she was missing a shoe and had sustained considerable trauma to her legs, although they did not elaborate on the extent of her injuries. Fire Chief Seth Williams of the Reno Fire Department referred to Stewart's rescue as a miracle story, and he shared that the son had called up some friends to help search for her, and one of them decided to head off the cliff, thinking she might have fallen down there. It was then that they found her clinging to a tree. The last thing she said before falling silent was, "Help."
Well, for a small department, run roughly 50,000 calls a year, and this one piqued my interest, so I started heading that way. Arrived on scene with a number of family members and people who had been searching for her, and got intel at that point in time she'd been missing for roughly 12 hours. And where she was hiking was a relatively common hiking area, although where she was found was a very unusual area, very steep, something you might consider similar to a double diamond ski run. And that's when we activated our urban search and rescue team. And you can see in the picture we had over 20 firefighters on scene. Paramedics made contact with the patient. She was in pretty bad shape, as the story says. She was clinging to a tree. The bystanders had given her a bunch of blankets, but she'd almost completely stopped shivering, which is a bad sign in terms of hypothermia. So our paramedics on scene, as well as a local ambulance company, started treating her. She had quite a bit of trauma to her lower legs, missing one of her shoes, so she'd been fighting back for a while. The amazing part, as I said, the friend's son, he said he decided just to go look down this hill for no real reason, hollered out and heard her say, "Help." And that was the last word she said. She was effectively catatonic after that. So it's really close. And for firefighters, we go on way too many recoveries. So to have a successful thing where you get to rescue somebody who is in bad shape, get them quickly to the ambulance, get them warmed up. From the time we made contact with the patient to having her in the back of the ambulance was just over a half hour. So successful in that terms. And I'm told that she's made a full recovery and is released from the hospital. And for a pretty dangerous situation. In fact, one of our firefighters fell because it was so steep and broke his thumb.
However, after a happy ending, this case would only get more mysterious. Stewart again was reporting missing exactly 1 month to the day on March 14th since her previous disappearance. The circumstances of her vanishing were odd, and the timing was eerie. Unlike her first disappearance, Stewart would not be found within hours this time around. Stewart was last seen in the Bypass Bridge parking area near the Hoover Dam, a 470-mile drive from her Reno, Nevada home. It seemed as though she was embarking on a nature walk, with park officials stating that she had gone to the area to take photos. Unfortunately, she disappeared again and never made it back to her vehicle. Tragically, there have been no updates on Stewart's whereabouts following her latest disappearance. Officials reported that she was last seen wearing a black long-sleeve shirt, black leggings, and black shoes. However, she did not have her cell phone or any identification with her at the time. Stewart is described as a 5-foot, 8-inch woman and weighing approximately 125 pounds. With both disappearances having taken place within such a short time frame, the search for Stewart has become a pressing concern for her friends, family, and authorities. They are appealing to the public for any information that could help locate her. In the meantime, the National Park Service Investigative Services Branch has set up a tip line for anyone with information related to Stewart's disappearance. They are asking individuals to contact them at 1-888-653-0009. As the search for Gail Stewart continues, her loved ones remain hopeful that she will be found safe and sound, just as she was during her first disappearance. The fact that she was found alive after her first ordeal is seen as nothing short of a miracle, and they are hoping for another positive outcome with this disappearance also. The story of Gail Stewart's 2 disappearances is a mystery that has captured the attention of both the local community and the wider public. While the search for her continues, it serves as a reminder for everyone to remain vigilant and aware of their surroundings, especially when venturing into remote areas. It also highlights the importance of carrying identification and a cell phone at all times. If you've enjoyed this content from Universe of Mystery, please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell. It really helps me to bring more mysterious stories to you.
The Great Smoky Mountains National Park, located in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, holds the distinction of being the most visited national park in the United States. Within this vast expanse of natural beauty lies the picturesque Cades Cove, a popular destination for both locals and tourists alike. Visitors often flock to the area to take in the breathtaking 11-mile loop road, which winds through the lush foliage and offers glimpses of the park's diverse wildlife. Along the way, travelers can also discover historic structures and snap photos of the stunning seasonal scenery, especially in the fall and spring. For those looking to extend their stay, the Cades Cove campground offers the perfect retreat, complete with numerous hiking and biking trails that allow visitors to truly immerse themselves in the unparalleled beauty of the park. Cades Cove is a popular destination in the Smoky Mountains, attracting visitors who are interested in catching a glimpse of the area's diverse wildlife. Whether you prefer to drive through or camp in the area, Cades Cove offers ample opportunities to observe a variety of creatures. While deer and black bears are commonly sighted, visitors may also encounter coyotes, groundhogs, turkeys, raccoons, and other fascinating species. For many families, including the Martin family from Knoxville, Tennessee, Cades Cove holds a special place in their hearts. For generations, the Martins have made an annual Father's Day weekend pilgrimage to the Smokies, specifically to camp and hike in Cades Cove. Their love for this beautiful area and the many unique experiences it offers continues to draw them back year after year. William Martin, along with his 2 sons, Douglas aged 9, and Dennis aged 6, embarked on a Father's Day weekend adventure on June 13, 1969. Accompanying them on the trip was William's father, Clyde. This was to be Dennis's first such adventure with his father, and the group planned to hike a 13-mile loop trail from Russell to Spence Field in Cades Cove. Both William and Clyde were experienced hikers, having taken this same route multiple times in the past. Douglas, who was only 9 years old, had also hiked the trail before, so he was familiar with the terrain. Although Dennis was only 6 years old, he had been on family hikes before and was able to keep up with the pace of the group. Their journey began in Cades Cove, where they set off on the trail that led them through Abrams Creek and past the junction of the Crib Gap Trail. As they continued on, they eventually arrived at Russell Field, where they were able to take in the breathtaking scenery and enjoy the wilderness. Upon reaching Russell Field on the evening of June 13th, the Martin family met up with Dr. Carter Martin, a family friend from Huntsville, Alabama, along with his 2 sons. It's important to note that despite sharing the same last name, there was no familial relation between the 2 Martin groups. The next morning, on June 14th, the group set out on a 90-minute hike along the Appalachian Trail towards Spence Field. This location was known for its stunning view of Mountain Laurel in full bloom during the month of June. Upon arriving at Spence Field, they were greeted by other members of the family who had also made the trek. After enjoying a late lunch, the Martin children, along with Dr. Martin's children, began to play together. During this time, Dennis's father, William, overheard a conversation between the boys as they huddled up and plotted a little scheme. They discussed the idea of running to the edge of the field, sneaking around, and carrying out a surprise attack to scare the adults. To make the plan more effective, they instructed Dennis to walk alone and stay away from them since he was wearing a bright red t-shirt that might spoil the surprise. William observed the boys joking and laughing together as they schemed their sneak attack. After lunch, 9-year-old Douglas Martin teamed up with Dr. Martin's sons and headed out in one direction, while 6-year-old Dennis headed off in another direction all alone, still wearing his bright red t-shirt. William Martin, Dennis's father, watched for a few minutes as his son walked away before turning his attention back to the rest of the group. A few minutes later, when the children jumped out to scare the grown-ups, no one immediately realized that Dennis wasn't with them. William had assumed that Dennis would catch up with the others and didn't worry too much at first. However, less than 5 minutes had passed before William realized that something was wrong. The family split up and began calling out for Dennis, but there was no answer. William began to feel a growing sense of panic as he and the others searched the area. Despite their efforts, they were unable to locate the little boy. Dennis's father, William Martin, was extremely worried as Dennis was a quiet child who always responded when someone called his name. In an attempt to locate his son, William decided to head in one direction while his father, Clyde, went in the opposite direction. William followed the nearby Appalachian Trail heading west, repeatedly calling out for Dennis as he walked. He covered a 1-mile stretch before turning around and heading back towards Russell Field. He then retraced his steps, hiking all the way back to Spence Field, thinking that Dennis might have gotten confused and followed the same path that they had taken earlier in the day. Despite his efforts, there was still no sign of Dennis. William eventually returned to Spence Field alone, feeling exhausted and defeated. This was 1969, a time when there were no cell phones or quick ways to call for help. Dennis's grandfather, Clyde, realized that they needed assistance and decided to hike to the nearest ranger station at Cades Cove, which was approximately 9 miles away. It took Clyde several hours to reach the ranger station, and by the time he got there, it was already 8:30 p.m. He reported Dennis missing to the Rangers, who immediately launched a search and rescue operation. Just as the search for Dennis began, a storm rolled in, further complicating the already challenging task of finding the young boy. The area where Dennis was last seen was known for its complex terrain and potentially dangerous wildlife, and with the added obstacle of heavy rain, the situation became even more daunting. Despite the challenges, a few rangers immediately began searching the immediate area around Spence Field where Dennis had last been seen. They notified dispatch that they planned to search through the night in the hope of finding the missing boy. In 1969, there was no established large-scale search and rescue operation plan in place for the Smoky Mountains National Park. Chief Ranger Sneddon organized a search crew that set up a headquarters camp in Spence Field, where they could plan their efforts to find Dennis. The search crew would begin their search early on the morning of June 15th, hoping to make progress in their quest to find the missing boy. Initially, the search crew for Dennis Martin consisted of 30 men with 5 leaders and 10 additional crews of 2 to 4 men. However, as the search continued, more volunteers arrived on site to join in the effort. By 1 p.m. on June 15th, the search party had grown to 240 people, but there was no clear leadership or coordination among them. As the days went by, more and more people joined in the search for Dennis, including Boy Scouts and rescue squads from the North Carolina side of the Smokies who brought in jeeps, trucks, and helicopters to aid in the search efforts. Eventually, more than 1,400 people would take part in the search. However, the large number of search teams and volunteers may have actually hindered the search. There was no established search and rescue operation plan for the park at the time, and the search lacked a clear chain of command. As a result, searchers were likely destroying evidence or any clues that could lead them to Dennis Martin. Despite the growing number of people involved in the search, Dennis remained missing. As the search for Dennis Martin continued, many different ideas and theories were put forward about what could have happened to him. Some of these came from psychics and fortune tellers who had contacted the authorities offering to help. One psychic from Los Angeles claimed to have seen the boy 2.5 miles to the left of where he had last been seen by his father or brother. According to this psychic, Dennis had fallen off a steep area and was now stuck in the bushes, but still alive. Another psychic from New Orleans suggested that the search should stop looking on the ground and start looking up in the trees and treetops to find Dennis. These were just a couple of examples of dozens of calls that the search team received from psychics who claimed they had information that could lead to Dennis. Despite the search leaders following up on every call, they all turned out to be dead ends. After a week of unsuccessful searching, the FBI was called in to investigate whether there was any indication of foul play or a potential kidnapping. The FBI will get involved in a missing persons case if there is a suspicion of a crime. FBI agent Jim Ride was assigned to look into the background of the Martin family to see if anyone could have had a motive to harm or abduct young Dennis. After thorough investigation, the FBI found no evidence of any enemies or suspicious individuals connected to the Martins. The lack of any solid leads prompted the FBI and the Martins to refocus their search efforts back in the Smoky Mountains. The Martin family cooperated with the authorities and tried to recall every detail they could remember from the time they arrived at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park until the last moment when William saw Dennis walking away from the group. They recounted everything that had happened during the initial search for Dennis, in the hours before Clyde Martin reached the ranger station. Dennis went missing around 4 p.m. and it took Clyde until 8:30 p.m. to get to the ranger station, which gave them a 4.5-hour window. The family searched the immediate area and enlisted the help of anyone around Spence Field who offered to assist in finding Dennis. The family went through each detail again with the FBI when they arrived to investigate whether Dennis's disappearance was a kidnapping. The FBI interviewed friends, family, and acquaintances but didn't find any enemies or people connected to the family who seemed suspicious enough to investigate further. So, they went back to the Smokies to continue the search for Dennis. The Martins raised some red flags and alerted authorities to investigate potential leads. One such lead was an unnamed man from Dandridge, Tennessee, who had been camping at Spence Field around the time of Dennis's disappearance. William Martin, Dennis's father, reported to park rangers that this man, referred to as Mr. Cooper, seemed to stick close to William during most of the search efforts. Adding to the mysterious circumstances was the emergence of an unknown woman who claimed to possess extrasensory perception. She reached out to the police department and requested to speak with Dennis's mother. After speaking with the woman, Mrs. Martin was instructed to be wary of Mr. Cooper from Dandridge. Concerned that the woman and Mr. Cooper may be working together to abduct Dennis, Mrs. Martin brought up the possibility to the police. Despite the potential lead, there is no public record indicating that authorities found the situation suspicious enough to launch a further investigation. Nevertheless, the Martins noted these strange occurrences and felt that they warranted attention. As the search for their missing son, Dennis, continued, the Martins grew increasingly desperate for any explanation that could offer hope for his safe return. They considered every possible scenario that could have led to Dennis's disappearance, including the idea that someone may have confused their family with another, but there is no publicly available evidence to suggest that this theory held any weight. Contained within the files that are public and related to the investigation into Dennis's disappearance are several intriguing leads and witness statements, among which is the account of a man named Harold Key. From Carthage, Tennessee, Harold and his family were present in the park on the day Dennis went missing. Specifically, they were in the C Branch area, located roughly 7 miles from Spence Field and near Rowan's Creek. According to Key, he heard a disturbing scream that afternoon, which prompted him and his wife to scan their surroundings, fearing that one of their children may be under attack by a bear. Shortly thereafter, Key spotted a suspicious-looking man moving swiftly through the nearby woods. Key recalls that the man appeared to be intentionally avoiding them, and he described the man as rough in appearance. Several days after Harold Key and his family were in the park, they returned home and learned of Dennis Martin's disappearance through news reports. Key immediately reported his account of the sickening scream and the rough-looking man he saw to park officials. However, after investigating the matter, park officials determined that Rowan's Creek was too far from Spence Field for the incidents to be related. Unfortunately, the available information on the investigation into Dennis's disappearance ends there. Although the FBI continued to collaborate with park officials throughout the search, the contents of their report remain a mystery. This lack of transparency has frustrated many who have attempted to obtain the official report through Freedom of Information requests. The search for Dennis continued for 7 agonizing days, and on June 20th, which was also Dennis's 7th birthday, park ranger records show plans were made for how to proceed if he was not found alive. The following day, with over 1,400 volunteers participating in the search, concerns arose that uncoordinated efforts could be doing more harm than good. As a result, park officials requested that volunteers stop joining the search, which had by that point covered over 56 square miles. As the search for Dennis Martin stretched on, the costs continued to pile up. Despite the massive effort from volunteers and law enforcement, the hope of finding Dennis alive began to dwindle. On Wednesday, June 25th, park officials announced that the search for Dennis would be coming to an end soon. For the Martin family, the news was devastating. After almost 2 weeks of camping out and searching tirelessly for their son, they had to pack up and head back to Knoxville with heavy hearts. The uncertainty surrounding Dennis's disappearance and the lack of answers only added to their anguish. As the search for Dennis Martin dragged on without any solid leads, the National Park Rangers made the difficult decision to suspend all major search operations on Sunday, June 29. Despite their best efforts, they had come up empty-handed and the FBI had found no evidence to support theories of Dennis being kidnapped. In the weeks that followed, the Martin family continued to hold out hope for any information that could lead to their son's safe return. They raised a reward of $5,000, equivalent to about $40,000 today, for anyone who could provide credible information about Dennis's whereabouts. However, as time passed and the search efforts turned up nothing new, the park officials had to make the tough call to officially close the search for Dennis Martin on September 11, 1969. The Martin family was left with no answers and the haunting memory of their son's disappearance in the Great Smoky Mountains. The disappearance of Dennis Martin has remained a mystery for over half a century, with no definitive answers as to what happened to the young boy. Various theories have been put forward, including the possibility that he became lost in the rugged terrain and perished due to the elements or being attacked by wildlife. Over the years, there have been several tips and leads that have emerged. One notable tip came in 1985 when a group of illegal ginseng hunters stumbled upon what appeared to be the remains of a small boy in an area about 3 miles from Spence Field, where Dennis was last seen alive. The hunters found a skull and other remains, but fearing arrest, almost 2 decades passed before one of the men called in the tip. When a search team finally looked for the remains, they came up empty-handed, as too much time had passed. According to a report by park officials, the search for Dennis was a marked failure. Despite the presence of many people on the scene, any possible evidence that could have been preserved was likely trampled upon by the numerous individuals who came to offer their assistance. The failure to properly coordinate and organize the search for Dennis Martin prompted the National Park Service to completely overhaul their search and rescue operations across all national parks. As a result of these changes, agencies all over the United States and the world have also adopted these new protocols, which have ultimately resulted in saving lives. Despite the positive outcomes of these changes, it is heart-wrenching to know that they came too late to rescue Dennis Martin. His disappearance remains an unsolved mystery, and his tragic case has served as a catalyst for reforming search and rescue procedures across the country.
In southeastern Arizona, nestled amongst the remote Chiricahua Mountains, lies a vast and rugged expanse of land known as the Chiricahua National Monument. This area is characterized by steep gullies, canyons, jagged rocks, and massive boulders balancing atop each other, creating a landscape that resembles the moonscape of some alien world. Despite its otherworldly appearance, the Chiricahua National Monument is part of a national park system. It holds a place on the National Register of Historic Places and is renowned for its natural beauty and unique rock formations. Visitors to this area can experience the wild and often lethal beauty of this land by hiking its scenic trails. However, the Chiricahua National Monument is also known for one of the most puzzling unsolved national park disappearances on record. The disappearance in question involves Paul Fugate, who at the time was a 41-year-old law enforcement ranger working for the National Park Service and stationed at the Chiricahua National Monument. Fugate was known for his enthusiasm as a ranger, his love for adventure, and his experience as a hiker. He was also highly knowledgeable of the region's terrain and geology. On January 13, 1980, a Sunday afternoon, Fugate told a seasonal staff member working with him at the Park Visitor Center that he was going to check the trail leading to a new 400-acre parcel of land acquired by the park called Fairway Ranch. After telling the staff member to close down without him if he wasn't back by 4:30 p.m., Paul Fugate, a seasoned park ranger, set out on the well-marked trail to the Fairway Ranch in his full ranger uniform and badge. It was supposed to be a quick hike, and Fugate didn't even bother to take his radio with him. He waved goodbye and casually walked out of sight. He then seemingly disappeared off the face of the earth. This would be the last confirmed time anyone would see him. When Fugate failed to return on time, a search was launched that involved tracking dogs, aircraft, and hundreds of law enforcement personnel from various agencies, including the National Park Service, the local Sheriff's Department, the Bureau of Land Management, the U.S. Forest Service, and the Southern Arizona Search and Rescue Association. Family members and volunteers also joined in on the search, starting with the trail at Fairway Ranch, where no trace of Fugate could be found, despite the search expanding to cover 17 square miles of rough and rugged terrain. Law enforcement authorities became increasingly desperate to locate Fugate and posted a $5,000 reward, which quickly ballooned to $20,000. However, none of this produced any leads. The only clue that seemed promising was from a witness who, under hypnosis, claimed to have seen Fugate unconscious in a truck between two unidentified men. There was absolutely no corroborating evidence to support this, and the witness himself admitted he could have been mistaken. The vehicle was traveling very fast, and ultimately, this lead led nowhere. Although it was widely assumed that Fugate had met with foul play, there was no concrete evidence to support this theory also. As the search for Fugate continued, various theories circulated about his disappearance. The most popular theory suggested that Fugate had stumbled upon drug dealers in the area and was either kidnapped or murdered, but once again, there was no evidence to support this. Another theory suggested that Fugate may have been attacked by a wild animal or had suffered an injury from falling, but considering his experience as a ranger, it was considered unlikely. Another possible theory was that Fugate intentionally disappeared. One clue that supported this theory was his instruction to the visitor center staff to close the center if he had not returned by 4:30 p.m., suggesting that he knew he might not be back. However, Fugate's family has challenged the theory that he abandoned his post, as he had left all his money and belongings at his home, as well as an expensive car he had been restoring and his beloved camera equipment.
Paul and Dodie's longtime friend Barbara Elfbrand admits the mystery is often on her mind.
I don't have the belief that I did originally that it would be solved. All the good clues or breakthroughs have led to walls which they couldn't get through. I know that Paul didn't just leave on his own, and I would like to know what happened to him, and it would be closure, it would be peace.
Fugate's disappearance is still one of the most puzzling unsolved national parks vanishings on record. In 1986, the National Park Service officially declared Fugate deceased, despite having no conclusive evidence of his death. There have been criticisms of the authorities' handling of the case, including accusations that they did not take appropriate measures, such as extending the search area beyond the parkland, and that the FBI did not take the case seriously enough and tried to dismiss it. Despite the lack of evidence, rumors and theories about Fugate's disappearance have continued to circulate. Some have speculated that he stumbled upon drug dealers in the area and was killed or kidnapped, while others have suggested that he may have been attacked by a wild animal or intentionally disappeared. While there is no concrete evidence to support any of these theories, the mystery surrounding Fugate's disappearance has yet to be fully resolved. In June of 2018, the National Park Service made a surprising move by reopening the decades-old case of Paul Fugate's disappearance. This announcement was made suddenly and without explanation, but it came with a substantial increase in the reward for information, which now stands at $60,000. The National Park Service cited the discovery of new evidence as the reason for this decision, although no specifics were given. The sudden reopening of the case has raised questions and speculation about what this new evidence could be and whether it is significant enough to bring the case to a close. When the National Park Service was asked about the new evidence, they replied with, quote, "We have no new information and respectfully decline to interview at this time." The fact that Fugate's case was reopened after so many years is unusual, and it suggests that authorities have reason to believe that they may finally be able to solve this mystery. However, whether this means that they are close to finding Fugate or discovering what happened to him remains to be seen. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance are murky and riddled with theories, rumors, and speculation. The lack of evidence or leads has made it challenging for investigators to determine what really happened to Fugate. What makes this case particularly strange is that most National Park Service rangers who have gone missing have been found, or at least some trace of them have been discovered. However, in Fugate's case, there is no concrete evidence to indicate what might have happened to him. Despite the renewed interest in the effort to solve this case, it seems that the disappearance of Paul Fugate remained a baffling mystery, at least for the time being.
Patty, also known as Patricia Krieger, was a 65-year-old woman who went hiking with her boyfriend, Larry Presley, her dog, and 5 other individuals who were friends and family of Larry's. They were in the Sauk Mountain area of Washington state on October 2, 2010, to scatter Larry's parents' ashes at the top of the trail. While hiking back down, Patty became separated from the group and started walking down the wrong trail. Although the group called out to her, she did not respond and continued walking. The group did not follow her, assuming they would meet back up at the bottom of the trail. When the group reached the end of the hike, they realized that Patty had not yet arrived. They waited for an unknown period of time before deciding to head off. Some of the hikers went to a nearby gas station, while others went shopping. The group estimated that Patty was left alone for around 4 hours. When they returned to the park and realized that Patty had still not shown up, they immediately notified the authorities. Unfortunately, despite extensive search efforts by the authorities and volunteers, Patty was never found. Her disappearance remains a mystery. The group Patty was hiking with claimed to be her family, which initially left her actual family unaware of her disappearance. It wasn't until a week later, when her employer contacted her son because she hadn't shown up for work, that they learned Patty was missing. Her dog, Bear, was found 3 weeks later, several miles from where she was last seen. Although malnourished, the dog was alive, indicating that it had been on the mountain since Patty had gone missing. Despite being physically fit, Patty was not an experienced hiker and was not dressed appropriately for the cold weather. When she was reported missing, law enforcement brought in scent dogs to track her movements. The dogs led investigators down the trail to the parking lot, suggesting that something might have happened to her once she had returned there. However, after finding Bear, the investigators re-evaluated this theory. According to Patty's friends and family, Larry Presley was found with her keys and driver's license after she vanished. One of his friends was also in possession of her mobile phone. Additionally, when Patty's family went to her house, they found a suitcase filled with jewelry in the back of a truck. When they finally entered the home, which required obtaining a court order because Larry was still living there with his friends, they discovered that it had been completely ransacked and trashed. Patty's safe had been rifled through, and there was garbage all over the floor. Her safety deposit box had also been emptied. In addition to the other suspicious circumstances surrounding Patty's disappearance, Larry and his friends were reportedly seen driving her vehicles after she went missing. The circumstances surrounding how Larry and Patty met were also strange. Larry had a lengthy criminal record, and upon his release from prison, he appeared at Patty's doorstep claiming to be a friend of her late husband, Jason Graham. Larry told Patty that Jason had asked him to take care of her if anything happened to him. Jason was a real estate agent, and it's unclear how he and Larry could have become acquainted. Patty's family believes that Larry may have read Jason's obituary in the newspaper and targeted Patty for personal gain. At the time Larry and Patty met, she was doing quite well for herself, owning her own home and several vehicles. Shortly after Larry moved in with her, several of his friends also moved in. Patty's friends and family reported that their relationship was rocky, and several red flags appeared throughout their time together. For example, she once found drugs hidden behind a fake wall in her shed. She also discovered a gun in the saddlebag of Larry's motorcycle and found out that he was having affairs with other women. According to Patty's family, they believed she was too afraid to end her relationship with Larry, who reportedly refused to help search for his missing partner after she vanished. Despite a search effort that included the use of thermal cameras and a helicopter, no sign of Patty was ever found. Her family suspects Larry may have played a role in her disappearance. In 2013, Larry was arrested and charged with federal weapons violations, and he received a 10-year prison sentence. However, he was released in 2018. Despite this, there has been no significant progress in the investigation into Patty's disappearance, which remains unsolved. The last sighting of Patty was in the Sauk Mountain area of Washington state on October 2, 2010, wearing a long-sleeve white top under a blue short-sleeve top, a black sweatshirt, and blue jeans. The disappearance of Patty Haskell in 2010 remains a mystery to this day, despite extensive search efforts and ongoing investigation. Her family suspects foul play, particularly involving her boyfriend at the time, Larry Presley, who had a criminal history and a suspicious relationship with Patty. Despite his refusal to help search for Patty and numerous red flags in their relationship, Larry was not charged in connection to her disappearance. Instead, he was later arrested on unrelated federal weapons charges and served time behind bars. Patty's family continues to hold out hope for answers, and her case serves as a reminder of the importance of staying vigilant and cautious in relationships, particularly with those who may have questionable pasts.
Welcome back to a universe of mystery. Today, we'll dive into the story of James Mcgrogan, a man who went missing in Vail, Colorado. On March 14, 2014, James Mcgrogan, a 39-year-old emergency room doctor, disappeared while visiting Vail, a small town at the base of Vail Mountain in the center of a large ski resort in Colorado's White River National Forest. Mcgrogan had been hiking with a group of friends when his friends decided to stop for a break. James didn't want to stop, so he decided to keep going alone, saying he'd meet up with his friends later in the day. Despite an extensive search and rescue operation, his body was not found until April 3, 2014, near Booth Falls in the Vail area. It is believed that he likely died from injuries sustained in a fall while hiking, but the exact circumstances surrounding his death remain unknown. The tragic incident left his family and friends wondering whether it was just misadventure, bad luck, or something else. It's important to note Mcgrogan was an experienced outdoorsman who loved hiking and exploring the mountains. On the morning of March 14, 2014, at about 8:30 a.m., Jim and 3 hiking companions left on a 9-mile hike to the Eastman Hut and beyond to Camp Hale. The camp is a collection of huts deep in the mountains to serve as a temporary shelters for hikers or campers. This site was originally built in the 1940s as the home of the 10th Mountain Division and a mountain warfare training area. At the time, there was a lot of snow in the area, several feet deep in some places. There are 2 main routes from the Vail area to the Eastman Hut, one via Spraddle Creek and a more westerly route via Red Sandstone Creek. Both of these trails were used heavily and were well marked with compacted snow. The hike itself was a 9-mile trail through steep and treacherous wooded terrain. The hut is not considered easy to reach. Although this was a challenging hike, Mcgrogan and company were experienced with the outdoors and well prepared. Mcgrogan himself carried with him a cell phone, basic medical supplies, a sleeping bag, an avalanche beacon, a GPS, warm clothing, and plenty of food and water. About 10 a.m., with the hikers still about 5 miles from the hut, the group stopped to rest. According to his companions, Jim decided to hike on ahead of the party, and they expected to catch up with him along the way. After Jim left the others behind to hike alone, he vanished. With the rest of the group reaching the Eastman Hut, it was late afternoon on March 14th. There was no sign at all of Mcgrogan. He was never seen alive again. By 5:30 p.m., the hikers had notified the Vail Department of Public Safety and subsequently the Eagle Valley Sheriff's Department. A rescue operation was started over an 18-square-mile area. Mcgrogan was well equipped, so authorities were not too concerned. He had food, water, and warm clothing, all the essentials needed to survive. He was also carrying a split snowboard, a snowboard that divides lengthwise, plus skins and other equipment from Confluence Kayaks in Denver, and was wearing the boots that went with the board. Mcgrogan's cell phone pinged once the day he was missing, but after that it went dead. Over the next 3 days, teams of searcher on foot, snowmobile, and 3 helicopters from the National Guard high-altitude aviation training site based near Gypsum, Colorado, searched the area, but by Tuesday, March 18th, bad weather forced the search to be suspended. Crews had spent a combined 1,000 hours searching for Mcgrogan. A 5-day search failed to find any sign of him despite snow in the area, which would have indicated if someone was hiking or skiing off the trail. 20 days later, Mcgrogan's body was found by a group of backcountry skiers about 4.5 miles from the trail on April 3, 2014. near the Booth Falls area. The reporting party told authorities that he and 2 others were skiing the Booth Falls area when they located the dead body in an ice fall below Booth Falls. He was found wearing his helmet, no coat, no gloves, and very strangely with no boots. In his backpack, his cell phone was discovered, and in this area there appeared to be active cellular reception. Jim's snowboard was also found nearby, but his boots were never located. On April 7, 2014, Eagle County Coroner Kara Bettis said that James Mcgrogan died of multiple injuries, including head trauma and to the left side of his chest. He also had a broken femur, and his death was ruled an accident. What happened to Dr. Jim Mcgrogan? He hiked 12 to 14 miles across the backcountry in deep snow, and the snow was up to 8 feet in some places, and apparently lost his boots. Perhaps he succumbed to hypothermia and began to paradoxically undress. Why didn't he use his cell phone or GPS? Both were fully functional. Why did he become separated from his hiking group and decide to leave on his own? A very mysterious case all around from the mountain of Vale. The story of Jim Mcgrogan is a tragic reminder of the risks and dangers that come with exploring the great outdoors. As an experienced hiker and snowboarder, Mcgrogan knew the importance of preparation and caution. Even the most experienced outdoorsman can fall victim to unexpected accidents and circumstances. While it's impossible to eliminate all risks when engaging in outdoor activities, there are several lessons that can be learned from Mcgrogan's story. First and foremost, it's crucial to be properly prepared and equipped for any outdoor adventure, whether it's hiking, snowboarding, or any other activity. This means carrying appropriate gear, checking weather conditions, and informing others of your plans and expected timeline. In addition, it's important to always stay aware of your surroundings, follow marked trails and boundaries, be mindful of your physical limitations. Finally, in case of an emergency, it is important to have a plan and know how to signal for help. Through the tragedy of Mcgrogan's death, his family and friends have dedicated themselves to promoting outdoor safety and preparedness, as well as honoring his memory through acts of kindness and service. By learning from his story and taking steps to stay safe in the great outdoors, we can honor his legacy and prevent future tragedies. There have been numerous strange and inexplicable disappearances and deaths in the remote wilderness areas around the world. These places are often treacherous and unforgiving, making them difficult for humans to navigate. Despite the inherent dangers of venturing into these wilds, there are cases where strange clues and eerie circumstances seem to be present. One of these unusual cases occurred in Crater Lake National Park in Oregon. Crater Lake National Park is located in Klamath County and is part of the majestic Cascade Range of southwest Oregon. The area is characterized by sprawling forests, fields of wildflowers, tranquil meadows, and towering cliffs and peaks. The air at Crater Lake is incredibly clean and clear, making it an incredibly beautiful location. The centerpiece of the park is Crater Lake, a strikingly beautiful body of water that is a deep shade of azure blue. Crater Lake covers an area of 21 square miles and has a maximum depth of 1,949 feet, making it the deepest lake in the United States and the 3rd deepest lake in the world based on average depth. It is a caldera lake that was formed by Mount Mazama, a 12,000-foot tall volcano that erupted and collapsed approximately 7,700 years ago, forming the lake. Despite its beauty, the lake has been the scene of many unexplained and strange disappearances. A man vanished in the wilderness of Crater Lake National Park, leaving behind only strange clues and a bizarre set of remains that defy explanation. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance and subsequent discovery has led many to believe that there is something otherworldly or inexplicable at work in this remote, beautiful wilderness area. In 1975, Charles McCullar, a 19-year-old aspiring photographer, was drawn to the majestic Crater Lake National Park, which was covered in snow at the time. McCullar left his home in Virginia in 1974 to embark on a cross-country photography expedition, traveling by bus and stopping at places along the way to go hiking, have adventures, and take pictures for a photographic travel journal. He arrived in Eugene, Oregon in January 1975, where he stayed with a friend for a few weeks. During this time, he planned to take a 2-day trip to the lake to do some winter photography work. He packed up his equipment and headed out on his own. Despite the harsh winter conditions, McCullar was well prepared for his journey, and with a camera in his hand, he set out into the wilderness. It was a normal thing for the intrepid adventurer and photographer to do, so his friend thought nothing of it when Charles said he'd be back in a few days. However, when 2 days came and went with no sign of Charles, his friend assumed that he had decided to extend his trip, but when another day passed with no sign of him, authorities were notified. Authorities found witnesses who had seen the man in the Diamond Lake area, which is about 45 minutes by car from Crater Lake. It is believed that he had continued his trip from there and had arrived safely at the lake. However, other witnesses had claimed that Charles had headed out hiking along the North Road, which was odd since there had been about 5 foot of snow along that route at the time. It was thought that he might have changed trails after encountering the snow, but no one knew for sure, and there was no sign of him or his campsite in the area. Despite the exhaustive efforts from authorities and the tireless work of Charles's father, who flew out to aid in the search effort and camped out on the shore of the lake for the entire summer, not a single trace of the missing man was turned up at this time. The search, which grew to involve the FBI, was hampered by immersed drifts of snow, some of which were over 12 feet deep. Even after the snow melted, it seemed as if the forest had just swallowed Charles up, leaving no clues behind. Despite the extensive search efforts, no trace of Charles or his campsite was found. The lack of evidence sparked speculation of his disappearance, ranging from the possibility of him changing his plans and leaving the park on his own to being a victim of foul play. Charles's friends and family expected foul play, and the involvement of the FBI seemed to confirm their suspicions. It was highly unusual for the FBI to come involved in a missing persons case without the suspicion of foul play. The FBI's involvement was so peculiar that one of Charles's friends involved in the search wrote to then Senator William L. Squat to inquire about it. The lack of any evidence caused speculation that Charles may have run off to start a new life somewhere. However, family and friends insisted that he would never have done this. Law enforcement seemed to embrace the idea that he had simply gotten lost and died out in the wilderness. Another theory was that he had been kidnapped or even murdered. Charles's friends and family suspected that he had been the victim of some sort of foul play, which would explain the FBI's involvement, although they made no public statement to this effect. Authorities shied away from the idea of foul play because there was no evidence to support it. Their main theories were that he had run off or had suffered some sort of misadventure out in the wilderness. In the meantime, there was no sign of Charles, no new leads, and it was as if he had just vanished off the face of the earth. It wasn't until the next year, in October 1976, that a pair of hikers found a battered, torn-up backpack down in a remote canyon located 12 miles from where Charles had been supposedly camped out. The hikers brought the backpack to a ranger station, and within a side pocket they found a set of keys belonging to a Volkswagen, which was the type of car Charles had owned. Sensing a break in the cold case had been found, rangers ran a comparison with a photocopy of Charles' actual car key and found it was a perfect match. A patrol was immediately sent out on horseback to the area where the backpack had been found, near a place called Briery Creek. It was not long before human remains were found near the creek, and although it seemed like the final piece of the puzzle, things would only get stranger from here. Upon a log in the vicinity, a pair of jeans was discovered by a search party. Surprisingly, the jeans were in good condition despite being exposed to the elements for an extended period. However, there were no traces of a shirt, coat, or boots nearby. Inside the socks protruding from the jeans, broken toe bones were discovered. The jeans also contained nothing but a broken shin bone. Adding to the mystery, the belt on the jeans were unbuckled and the buttons were unfastened, indicating that the man may have removed them in the cold. Strangely, the rest of the body was nowhere to be found, and a ranger had described it if the man had just melted away. The search team had also found a crown of a skull and a few bone fragments located about 12 feet from the jeans. Despite a comprehensive search of the area, no additional remains of Charles were discovered, and all of his clothing, except for his jeans and socks, were missing. None of Charles's personal belongings, such as his wallet or camera, were found in the area either. The condition of Charles McCullar's remains were not only bizarre, but also raised many questions regarding how he ended up in that location. The area was remote and rugged, making it almost impossible to access, especially during the deep drifts of snow at the time of his disappearance. The fact that he was able to hike 12 miles away from his camp on foot, without shoes on, in such conditions, was baffling. Furthermore, it was puzzling as to why he would have gone to that location in the first place. The missing clothing only added to the mystery. Authorities attributed the missing clothing to a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing, where someone with hypothermia will feel hot and remove their clothes in an attempt to cool off in freezing conditions. However, this theory did not explain the condition of his remains in this completely bizarre state. Authorities ruled Charles McCullar's death as natural, stating that his body had been ravaged by wildlife after his death. However, his family did not accept this explanation. His brother, Steve, expressed his disbelief in the authorities' ruling, saying that the broken-off shin bone might tell a different story, one of foul play. Steve believed that Charles may have hitchhiked a ride with someone that stole his camera equipment, money, and may have shot him, and disposed of his body in the most remote part of Crater Lake, hoping that animals would destroy the evidence by spring. The mysterious disappearance and death of Charles McCullar remains unsolved to this day, leaving his friends and family with unanswered questions and lingering suspicions. Despite the odd circumstances of his remains being found miles away from his campsite and in a state of extreme decomposition, authorities closed the case, declaring it to be a death of exposure to the elements. The story highlights the need for thorough investigation and the need to investigate all possible explanations, including foul play. It also emphasizes the need for effective communication between law enforcement agencies and families of missing persons. Finally, it underscores the value of community involvement and the tireless efforts of volunteers and search and rescue operations. Charles McCullar's story serves as a cautionary tale for hikers and outdoor enthusiasts. It is also important to inform someone of your plans, including your intended route and expected time of return, and any alternate plans in case of an emergency. This information can be shared with family, friends, park rangers, or other authorities. Hikers should also be aware of the signs and symptoms of hypothermia, especially in the high-altitude terrain. If you've enjoyed this content from a universe of mystery, please subscribe, like, and share to the channel. Welcome back to a universe of mystery. Today we'll be exploring the disappearance of Joe Elliott Blakesley and Amy Linkart. In September 2013 at Craters of the Moon National Monument in Idaho. The remains were eventually found between September and October of the same year. Joe Elliott Blakesley, age 63, was a physician who worked at a correctional institute in Ontario, Oregon, while Amy Linkart, age 69, was a retired school teacher from Lowell Scott Middle School in Meridian, Idaho. The two women met while doing missionary work back in the 1980s. The two friends embarked on a journey in September 2013 and headed for Craters of the Moon National Monument. Unfortunately, they never returned from their short hike. Now, I've been to Craters of the Moon. I was there in 2014. It is an absolute beautiful but treacherous landscape. It's old lava flows that have hardened to jagged, sharp rocks and caves. There's caves all over the place, and you would have to be absolutely out of your mind to leave the marked trail. There are jagged rocks that you can't even step on without the threat of falling through a cave. While we were there, we did hike a few trails, and we did explore a few caves. This national monument is located in central Idaho. It was established in 1924, and it's situated along US 20, concurrent with US 93 and 26, and it lies between the town of Arco and Cary, with an average elevation of 5,900 feet. This volcanic region is one of the best preserved flood basalt areas in the United States. The region is composed of 3 major lava fields, spanning a total area of over 1,000 square miles. And you do not want to get lost out there, because literally it looks like desolate wasteland as far as the eye can see. Joe and Amy were reported missing on September 23rd, after Dr. Elliott Blakesley's colleagues alerted the authorities when she didn't show up for work. Due to a federal looming government shutdown, the official search did not begin until October 1st. However, 10 rangers did respond and started the search without the aid of federal money such as dogs, rescue teams, and helicopters. Joe and Amy were last seen at a nearby campground in Arco, approximately 18 miles from the park. Authorities discovered park receipts, which had shown the women visited the park on September 24th. Their vehicle was later found at the Tree Molds Trail parking lot. Their dogs, cell phones, purses, and other belongings were found in the truck. Now, it is important to note that at Craters of the Moon, dogs are not allowed on the trails in the park. They're allowed in the parking lot and certain common areas, but they don't allow them on the trails. The terrain is so sharp and jagged, it's just not safe for dogs to be there. And the surface of the rocks can reach up to 150 degrees in some cases. When the search was expanded, they discovered Amy's remains in a lava field north of the Tree Molds Trail. Amy was found on the rocks, laying face up with no backpack, no jacket, no food, no water, none of the essentials needed to survive. Authorities believed that she had become disoriented because the direction she was walking was kind of facing towards a highway that you could see in the distance, and authorities believe she eventually just succumbed to exposure. But no foul play was suspected. Initially, the searchers thought they had found Joe, but after a confirmation of dental records, it was found that was actually Amy's body, which isn't surprising given how much the two women do look alike. After an additional month of searching, authorities did recover Joe Elliott Blakesley's remains about a mile from where Amy was found, and it was about 2.5 miles away from where their pickup was found. And this was an area that search helicopters had flown over, but it's believed that the way the terrain is set, and they just couldn't spot her from above. She blended in right with the rocks. And she was kind of found inside one of these caverns. So her body was obstructed from the air, and she also appeared to have succumbed to dehydration and exposure to the elements. Since Amy and Joe were not seen since they had checked into the park, there were no witnesses on the trail, so nobody's quite sure about how they got separated or why they separated, but authorities concluded that it could have been that one of them was hurt, so they decided to split up so the other one could go get help. And it's not surprising to me, because if you venture off that trail, it is very easy to hurt yourself or get stuck, get a leg stuck or twist an ankle. But the question still remains, why were they found so far away from their truck when all indications pointed to where this was supposed to be a short hike, leaving the dogs in the car, leaving their cell phones in the car? And it's just believed that they became disoriented. There were reports, I couldn't find consistent reporting on this, but there were reports that the weather had started to shift and a storm was moving in. So maybe it got foggy and they just lost their way. As mentioned earlier, maybe one of them got hurt and the other went to seek help and got lost and headed towards that highway, the only place she could see for help in the distance. But that distance is very unforgiving, and it's hard to judge just how far something is away in that terrain because everything looks the same. It's like seeing a ship on water that you think is right there, but once you start swimming towards it, you realize how far it is. So the conclusion by the authorities was just that they were found, that they got separated, possibly injured, and they had just succumbed to the harsh Idaho elements. What do you think happened to Amy and Joe? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this content, please subscribe, like, and share. It really helps the channel, and it really helps me to bring more videos like this. The first snowfall of the year is usually a beautiful and joyous celebration in the small ski town of Mammoth Lakes in California's Eastern Sierra. But the early October snow in 2013 was disheartening for the searchers of a missing Pennsylvania man. Hope was fading with the inevitable change in season, and those close to him were starting to understand the grave reality that he may never be found. From more than 2,500 miles away, his loved ones experienced a tug-of-war between despair and optimism, feeling helpless across the country as they went through the motions of their daily lives. 3 months earlier, in July, the 39-year-old high school math teacher dropped his car off at a Mammoth auto car shop for repairs. He was visiting the area for a summer climbing vacation when the car blew a head gasket. The friends Green was traveling with headed home, and Green planned to drive to Colorado to join other friends for more climbing as soon as his car was ready. "I may have to spend the rest of my life here in Mammoth," he texted to a friend as he got more and more frustrated with how long the repair was taking. He was anxious to get on with his trip, no one has heard from Green since he last talked to his parents on July 16, 2013. He did not tell anyone his plans for the following day. He never picked up his car. His campsite was left tidy, and his credit cards and phone have not been used since. Matthew had a habit of ripping out pages from a guidebook as to where he planned to hike, instead of taking the entire book with him. When he returned from a hike, he would replace the missing pages as a trophy of sorts. The only clue that was found was a few pages torn from a mountaineering guidebook, and this pointed toward the Minarets and Ritter Range in the Ansel Adams Wilderness. At the time, Mammoth Lakes was experiencing sunshine and above-average temperatures. On July 29, 2013, Matthew Green was reported missing, and his body has not been found in the years since. In 2013, more than 600,000 Americans were reported missing in the United States, according to the FBI and National Crime Information Center. At the end of the year, nearly 85,000 of those cases were still active. At the time he went missing, Matthew Green was the only unsolved missing person case in Mammoth Lakes, and in January 2014, Reed's family filed for a death certificate in Pennsylvania. But the case is still open with the Mammoth Lakes Police Department. Most people assume that Matt was a victim of some sort of climbing accident, a fall of some sort, said his friend John Greco, that met him in California. But all his friends agreed that he was experienced, skilled, and careful in the mountains. Born on September 8, 1973, to Robert and Patricia Green, Matthew is the second of 4 children. He grew up in rural Pennsylvania, developing a love for the outdoors from a young age. He was a Boy Scout and often went hunting and fishing with his dad. Growing up in the boondocks of Franklin Townships was a blessing. Green wrote in 1999 in a letter to his sister, Tiffany Minto, when he was in the Peace Corps. I came out of there with independence, a love of nature, and a determination to succeed in school, life, or whatever. When they were kids, Green would take Minto fishing and target shooting at the lake, where they'd stay until bugs feasted on their arms. They went hiking together often, even in the really cold winters common to the Northeast. The ice didn't slow him down one bit. I struggled to keep up, Minto said. Green loved to run, competing on the track team in high school and running the Boston Marathon a few times as an adult. As the student speaker for his high school graduation, Green urged his classmates to take chances. The time has come to fulfill our current goals and to set new ones to be conquered later. In our future travels and endeavors, no matter where they take us, we must not use our youthful imaginations. We must not be too scared to take risks, and most of all, we must live life to the fullest. Matthews said in his high school graduation speech. Green went on to study at Clemson University in South Carolina before transferring to and graduating from Penn State University. As a Peace Corps volunteer on a teaching assignment in Papua New Guinea from 1998 to 2001, he regularly wrote letters to her sister giving her advice on life, college, and relationships. Any associations you have in your life can be lumped into one of these 3 categories: people who push you forward, people who drag you down, and people who do neither, he wrote. He also wrote to friends, telling tales of his adventures, like walking 6 hours to fix a radio transceiver in a hiking tour, which was a 9-hour trek across dense brush and mountainous terrain, where he found himself crossing a roaring 100-foot waterfall, wading for shallow rivers, carefully walking, and descending countless valleys. In his letters, Green not only gave accounts of his work and explorations, but he also contemplated life and its greater meanings. He wrote, "It's a pitiful thing when people reach the point in their lives where passionate inclinations in their lives no longer win out over regular routines. I don't know why our minds always gravitate towards reason. It's a nuisance. At least for me. It takes a lot of mental effort to give in to his passions, but once I've devoted myself to them, I'm never plagued with regret." When he returned from the Peace Corps, Green got a job as a high school math teacher in Pennsylvania and would go on summer climbing trips to fulfill his needs for adventure. He often traveled out west solo for camping, hiking, and climbing, occasionally meeting up with friends along the way. In 2006, he road tripped through South Dakota, Wyoming, and on to Red Lodge, Montana. When his car broke down at the end of the trip, he tooled around town and hitchhiked to a trailhead. In his trip log, he wrote, over the course of a few days, "I put in an awesome 10-hour hike. The rock was surprisingly solid. Yet, some big pieces moved. I returned to find that rodents had torn into my engine plug wires, vacuum hoses, and mostly wire sheathing. I coasted into town and took my car into the shop. They should get to it tomorrow morning." The next day, he wrote, "Same as yesterday, no car yet. Hitched a ride out to the Bear Track and hiked up the Silver Plateau. It's awesome up there. Good mix of pines and open fields. More reading, more net searching, coming up with a plan. Yellowstone, climb Tiwanaut, Wind River Range, ring the bells, maybe the Great Sands Dunes, and Long's Peak, then home. Still waiting on that car." Green arrived in Mammoth Lake a few days before he met up with his friends John and Jill Greco on June 28, 2013. He set up camp at New Shady Rest Campground on the edge of town and paid for July 7th. John, Jill, and their 9-year-old son checked in at a hotel nearby. Over the next 10 days, Green and John climbed many of the region's classic routes, places like Crystal Crag, Clark's Canyon, and the Gong Show Crag. They also hiked a few of the Eastern Sierra's classic alpine routes. Green kept a handwritten log of his climbs, sometimes elaborate and other times brief. He often checked and reported conditions on websites. During this trip, he wrote on Summit Post, "Did the V-notch on Saturday, July 6th. We easily crossed it via a snow bridge. We studied the route well for signs of rockfall before committing, and only had one baseball-sized rock rocket down during our ascent. Tons of rocks were falling the U-notch." During Green's time in Mammoth, his Subaru was in and out of the auto repair shop. It would get fixed, then overheat, driving up a steep grade and go back to the mechanic. It was finally diagnosed with a blown head gasket, which would take additional time to repair. On July 7th, John and Jill were scheduled to leave Mammoth Lakes. John had a work meeting in Southern California the next day, and Matt planned to leave for Colorado to meet up with some other friends. That morning, the whole group hiked to Emerald Lake in the Mammoth Lakes Basin, before Matt continued up the trail to the Mammoth Crest, and John and Jill headed down to their car to begin the drive. It was the last time any of Matt's friends would ever see him again. As we were walking down the trail, I say to my husband, "You know, he goes off like this, and he doesn't tell anybody. If something happens to him, nobody will know where to look," Jill said. Her husband said, "Yeah, and the bad thing about it is that his car won't be at the trailhead." Even though Green had planned to leave that day as well, his car was still in the shop. He was fine being stuck in Mammoth. It's not like he was in the middle of some remote backcountry area. There were shuttles to take you all over the place, and he thought it was only going to be a couple of days. Over the next 8 days, Green continued to climb classic Sierra peaks and routes, checking in with John and Jill by text message every few days. On July 8th, Green soloed Regal Huff Minaret, a 10,560-foot spire in the Ritter Range west of Mammoth Lakes. On July 9th, Green headed north to climb Dana Coalyard, a popular 1,200-foot ice route on a 13,000-foot peak near Yosemite Park's entrance. Later, he sent John an update. The Regal Huff Minaret took less than 6.5 hours round trip, but was scary, and the Dana Coalyard was easy but fun and had the best ice of the trip. July 10th was arrest day. On July 11th, Green took the shuttle to Red's Meadow Valley to hike and climb in the Minarets and Ritter Range again. On the ride to the trailhead, he spoke to a Devil's Post maintenance worker. They talked about climbing Mount Ritter, Banner Peak, Clyde Minaret, and the cross-country hikes between the Minaret Lakes. Matthew was not sure of his itinerary for the day when he got off the shuttle at the Devil's Post Pile trailhead, but he eventually climbed the 12,280-foot Clyde Minaret, the tallest of the Minaret's jagged peaks. From July 12th to the 15th, Green hiked the cross-country route on Mammoth Crest, and he climbed Unicorn Peak in Yosemite's high country. On July 16th, he went to the Mammoth Lakes Library to use the internet. He called his parents and the mechanic, then sent a few text messages and made a small purchase at Rite Aid. He paid the campground for the night and the next day. Since Jill and John left Mammoth, they continued texting back and forth with Green every few days. Jill updated him on details for a trip to France they were tentatively planning later that summer, and John received updates on the climbs Green had done. Jill grew concerned when Green stopped responding to texts. At first, she didn't think anything about it. Then she called him, and her husband sent him a text. Again, they didn't hear from him. On July 21st, after 3 unpaid nights, the host at the campground reported the abandoned campsite and suspicion of a missing person to the Mammoth Lakes Police Department. 2 officers responded to the call, visited the campground, and recorded the information on a police log. Campsite number 164 was left intact, but Green had not returned to it. His neatly folded laundry was stored inside the tent along with some gear. His food was in the bear box. MLPD Detective Dung Hordback said, "We can't really do a whole lot unless a missing person report is filed. We'll get a name and the information, we'll put it on the log, and that's as far as it goes at this point." So the campsite was broken down, Green's gear was put into storage, and new campers soon occupied the site. On July 26, Green's mom expressed concern that she hadn't heard from Matt. She'd been leaving messages that went unanswered. But Green often went on long hikes and backpacking trips and didn't return messages immediately. Sometimes it would take him days or weeks to readjust to society after a good trek. He enjoyed the solitude of the wilderness and was not into technology, so his sister Minto brushed off his mom's concerns. She said he probably couldn't charge his phone or was spending some time in the backcountry. They knew that Green could not use his car phone charger because his Subaru was still in the shop, so she thought maybe his phone was dead. Still, she knew that his lack of response was unusual, and she grew increasingly concerned when she didn't hear from him for 10 days. John called Tony, Green's friend, that he was planning to meet in Colorado to see if Green had arrived. Maybe he was spending time in the backcountry, Tony suggested. On July 29th, 7 days after Green's campsite was packed up and put into storage, Jill called the Norco Goodyear to inquire about his car. She was told it had been ready since July 18th. Green had not responded to a message saying the car was ready, and he had not picked it up. Jill then called the Mammoth Lakes Welcome Center and talked to a ranger. She asked for someone to check on his campsite, and the ranger insisted she file a missing persons report. 13 days after Green disappeared, he was officially reported missing. Green was no stranger to climbing mountains. His list of ascents logged on Summit Post read like the resume of an experienced mountaineer. His friends said he was skillful on ice, calculated in the outdoors, and did not take risks. More than 2 weeks after Green talked to his parents for the last time, Detective Hornback contacted Verizon for an emergency information request. Verizon concluded that Green's phone had been powered off for quite some time, and there was no way to track the current location. The last ping was registered to the cellular tower on Mammoth Mountain on July 16th. According to Detective Hordbeck, the ping created a cone-shaped triangle with towers in Fresno and June Lake, indicated that Green phone was located within that region, which consists of mostly of the Ansel Adams wilderness. The Mammoth Lakes Police Department did not find any evidence of foul play, and the possibility of suicide was quickly ruled out. Green did not have any financial trouble. He was single and showed no signs of depression. When the Grecos last saw him in Mammoth, Jill said he was as normal and optimistic as he normally was. On July 31st, Detective Hornbeck notified Bill Green, no relation, at Mono County Sheriff's Search and Rescue. Typically, when a person is reported overdue in the mountains, SAR launches an investigation. They are quick to respond and have a healthy roster of volunteers that are experienced mountaineers, but Matthew Green did not tell anyone where he was going. And his car was still at the mechanics, so they didn't even have a trailhead to go from. Without a known location, SAR could not begin a search. Matthew Green could have gone anywhere. Most of his equipment was stored in his car, which was parked outside the Norco Goodyear while waiting for repair, meaning he had access to his personal belongings 24 hours a day. From an inventory of the equipment left in his car and tent, friends were able to deduce what he was carrying with him. He was probably wearing a blue outdoor ball cap, a black t-shirt over a long-sleeve green shirt, and mountaineering approach shoes. He had a large black and white mountain hardware backpack, an ice axe, black diamond crampons, and was either carrying or wearing boots. He did not have overnight gear. Since he had no vehicle, Green's only option to get to trailheads was to either walk, hitchhike, or public transport. With a number of local shuttle services, which Green had used in the week prior to his disappearance, he could have made it to a number of trailheads, from the Mammoth Lakes Basin to Yosemite Valley. From the guidebook found in his belongings, Chapter 12 was torn out, which included minarets and June Lake. With the shuttle to Red's Meadow, Green could have been at any one of 3 main trailheads in the valley that leads to a network of paths that access the trail ranges in the wilderness. The 231,533-acre wilderness area is located west of Mammoth Lakes and the Sierra Nevada crest in Madera County. It shares a border with Yosemite National Park to the north and the 581,000-acre John Muir Wilderness to the south. The region is popular for hiking, backpacking, and climbing. The mountain range is vast and rugged. Even though SAR could not launch a full-on search without a known destination, they sent teams to the Minaret region on training missions. They checked summit registers in the range, and a helicopter team did a flyover. Detective Hornbeck worked with the U.S. Forest Service to contact people with overnight wilderness permits for the region. If anyone spoke with Green on the trail or shuttle or gave him a ride, they have not come forward yet, or they do not know he is missing. Green's family hired an aerial tour company to fly over the region. They mounted a red digital camera to the wing of an old Piper airplane. The camera is capable of recording high-quality images at 30 frames per second while being zoomed in at 3x. They recorded 100 gigabytes of data that was later processed and examined, but showed no evidence of Green. Detective Hornbeck followed up on every single tip. Psychics from around the world called with information after looking into a crystal ball or having a dream. A retired police officer in Minden, Nevada, reported a sighting of a young man that fit the description of Green at a Nevada gas station. A woman said she had given Green and his dog a ride to Colorado, but Green did not have a dog. Glasses were found near the Inyo Crater's trailhead less than 10 miles from Green's campsite, but the prescription did not match. The police talked with campers in the lakes adjacent to Green's. They interviewed the employees at the auto shop. No one had any concrete information. What frustrated them the most was that he was so experienced, but he didn't tell anyone where he was going. There's nothing wrong with sending a text and saying, "Hey, I'm going to go climb in the minarets today." That would solve a lot of problems. Detective Hornbeck said, Green's sister began compiling facts and information, creating a Find Matthew Green Facebook page. She did interviews with reporters. Friends started forum on climbing websites seeking information. Conversations were started and theories were tossed around. Where would Matthew Green have gone? The MLPD press release was published in the local papers. Media outlets in Pennsylvania picked up the story, and a short news brief made it Los Angeles Times. What makes the minaret so appealing to climbers is also what makes the Rubbet Peak so dangerous for climbing. The Ritter Range is located within the Sierra Nevada, just west of the crest. The jagged landscape of the minarets and sharp summits of Mount Ritter and Banner Peak can be seen from all over Mammoth Lakes. The range stands tall and mighty, separating the Sierra from the rounder mountains in the coastal range. Unlike the granite that makes up much of the Sierra, the Ritter Range is metavolcanic rock, which was formed in several volcanic supereruptions, according to Alan Glassner, professor of geology at the University of North Carolina and author of a book about the geology in and around Yosemite. These eruptions produce hot volcanic rock deposits that flow much like an avalanche. Metavolcanic rocks are generally kind of sketchy for climbing because they flake apart easily and are not nearly as strong as granite. That's why they form spiky landform like the minarets instead of big smooth cliffs like Half Dome. It's been years since Matthew Green disappeared from Mammoth Lakes, and still no trace of him has surfaced. In August 2014, his campground neighbors returned to the area and saw a missing persons sign. They called the police department and met with Detective Hornbeck and Bill Green from Search and Rescue. They said they invited Matthew to go for a hike with them, but he declined. He did not say, or they could not remember where he was going. Since Green was carrying an ice axe and crampons, Mount Ritter is a logical guess for his destination on July 17, 2013. The Southeast Glacier is the most prominent snow route in the range. The trailhead is accessible from public transportation. Was in the chapter of the guidebook that he was carrying. For even the fittest of mountaineers, climbing Mount Ritter in one day is a huge feat, and the hike is 7 miles one way. And then it is another 4,000 vertical feet of off-trail hiking and climbing to reach the summit. At the time of Matt's disappearance, I had a pretty strong suspicion that he had gone to Mount Ritter, but after reflecting on it and revisiting the area last summer, I am not so sure, said John Greco. I don't think the climb itself would be particularly appealing to Matt. It seems like somewhat of a slog with limited technical challenges. Green did not have any unknown pre-existing medical conditions, and an animal attack is doubtful, as no evidence were ever found. There has never been a human death by mountain lion or black bear in the region, and grizzly bears haven't been there since the 1920s. It seems likely that Matthew Green had a fatal climbing accident. Maybe he would have set out to climb the region's tallest and most prolific mountain on his last day in the area, but there is no hard evidence. If Matthew Green hitchhiked like he had been known to do in the past, he could be anywhere. And since he had climbed in the minarets a few days prior to his disappearance, it is possible that the chapter of the guidebook was still in his pack. But there was enough suspicion that multiple search parties focused on the minarets and the Ritter Range. Green's close friend and climbing partners went to Mammoth Lakes to search in August 2013, and a number of local climbers and mountaineers have spearheaded their own small search parties in search of Matthew. Dean Rosnaw, a former SAR officer and member, has spent nearly 30 days searching for Green. In August 2013, Rosnaw focused on the minarets. But late that summer, he began to gravitate toward Ritter and Banner. In a search area so vast, what we are looking for is so small. One will literally have to step on the evidence to find it, Rosnaw said. A lot of gear has been hauled out of the wilderness areas that surround Mammoth Lakes, but none of it has been identified as Matthew Green's. The unknown and lack of resolution is part of a grieving process unlike any other. When the snow started to fall in 2013, the search came to a halt and the missing person posters were taken down for the season. The family petitioned for and received a death certificate in Pennsylvania so they could settle his affairs. There has been no memorial service. The hardest part is the not knowing, said his friend Tom Davidoff. If he had let someone know where he was going, we have a completely different situation. But you can't get mad at him. We've all done it. Green's closest friends and climbing partners each say they don't climb as much as they used to, and most of them can't really explain why, other than the disappearance of Matthew. There is a lingering feeling of disappearance and sorrow that just dampens their enthusiasm. Greco hasn't done any mountain climbing since Matt disappeared, with the exception of the searches that they did for him. He can attribute it to a lack of partners, work, and family responsibilities getting in the way, but in truth, I just haven't been motivated to make it happen, he said. In 2014, Green's father, Robert, spent the summer in Mammoth Lakes. At 69 years old, he was slightly overweight and out of shape, but he began training so he was conditioned to hike in the High Sierra. He wanted to spend the summer in the mountains where his son is presumed dead, and he hiked nearly 700 miles that summer. He explored the trails that Matt had enjoyed. He searched with Rosnaw, and he climbed for the first time. Greco led Robert up Crystal Crag so he could stand on a summit that Matt had also stood on in the year prior. Green's mother wanted him to get a taste of the kind of climbing Matt loved to do most, so he could hopefully understand the appeal and attraction. She just kept thinking about how Matt would have enjoyed watching his dad climb, something I'm sure he never would have considered doing before Matt's disappearance. Green's mother, Patricia, visited Mammoth Lakes that summer for the first and only time for 1 week with her daughter. Not a hiker, Patricia spent most of the time in town, while Minto hit the trails with her father. She felt completely at peace and in awe of the beauty. But turning home just felt like she was turning her back on Matt and the possibility of finding him. She wished she could move on, but it's just impossible. To this day, no trace of Matthew Green has ever been found. What do you think happened to Matthew Green in the mountains? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It really helps me provide this content to you and tell the stories of the missing. Welcome back to a universe of mystery. Today we're going to delve into the story of Aaron Hedges, a 38-year-old hunter that went missing outside of the Crazy Mountains in Montana. Now, Aaron grew up in this area of the country, out west. He was an avid hunter. He hunted this area his entire life. So much so that from years prior, he had caches hidden all over the mountains. That way, if he ever needed any supplies on a future hunting trip, he could go and uncover one of the caches and have what he needed so he didn't have to end his trip early. Aaron Hedges was last seen on September 5th, 2014. Him and two of his hunting friends decided to go on a hunting trip to hunt elk right outside the Crazy Mountains. The Crazy Mountains get their name, or the Crazies for short, from a lore story about a woman whose entire family was killed by Indians, and she went after them with one of their own tomahawk axes and ran into the mountains, never to be seen again. So Aaron and his two buddies head up into the mountains, and they have to, it's bow hunting season at the time, so they all have to have bows with them, although they did have some guns for their own protection. Aaron and his two buddies had a plan. They were going to hike to a place called Campfire Lake. Now, you can't get close to this lake by vehicle. You can get to like the base of the Crazy Mountains by vehicle, but in order to get to this Campfire Lake where they were going to set up a base camp and stay for around 7 days hunting elk, it's a good ways hike. So what they did was, instead of having to carry all their gear on their person, they had 2 horses and a mule to carry their gear for them. Now, a couple miles into this hike, something spooked the animals. The horses went crazy, the mule went crazy, and the mule actually got away and ran off, spilling most of Aaron's gear all over the place. So now they got to stop, try and collect and salvage what kind of gear that they have, but Aaron was missing gear. But they figured this be no big deal because there were caches that they had hidden all over the place. So their plan was to just continue on with the hike to Campfire Lake, get a base camp set up. The other guys had extra supplies, so supplies weren't going to be a big deal right off the bat, and they would be able to eventually uncover one of these caches and have extra supplies. So Aaron and his buddies get to Campfire Lake, and the weather is beautiful. All the reports say it was about 50 degrees, sunny. You couldn't just ask for any better hiking or hunting weather. So they get to the base camp, they get the base camp set up, and they stay there for 2 days. Aaron doesn't have a sleeping bag, so he gets tired of having to sleep next to the fire and getting cold at night. So he decides he's going to go find one of his caches. Around 10 a.m. the next morning, Aaron leaves his buddy and says he's going to hike up to a place called Sunlight Lake to retrieve one of his caches that he had up there. Now, he had a cell phone, a gun, and they had walkie-talkies. On the way to Sunlight Lake, there's a fork in the trail, and the trail is really well marked, really worn. It's really hard to get lost on this trail. So Aaron goes off to try and find one of these caches, and that was at 10 in the morning. So around 5 p.m., his buddies still hadn't heard from him, hadn't seen him, and they started to wonder where he was and if he was okay. And they did have these walkie-talkies that are hooked through a GPS system. So when you walkie somebody, and they respond, it sends the actual coordinates of where the person is responding from to the other walkie-talkie and vice versa. So it's really kind of hard to get lost this way because they know exactly where each other are. However, what Aaron was saying, his buddies found really hard to understand. They described it as like garble, talking nonsense. They couldn't really understand what he was saying, but they did hear him, and they knew he was still alive, and they had his coordinates. But what gets really weird is the coordinates that they were sent on the walkie-talkie showed that he was going the wrong direction. He had taken the wrong fork in the road, and somebody with Aaron's outdoor experience, that seemed like a real trivial mistake for an experienced outdoorsman to make. So they became concerned. So they waited another few hours, and later that night, before they were getting ready to go to bed, they tried to radio Aaron again. However, this time there was no response on the radio. So now his buddies wake up the next day, still no sign of Aaron, and now they can tell the weather is starting to shift. There's a bad snowstorm about to move in, but they decide, let's give him another day in case he comes wandering in and shows up with his gear, and then they could all leave together. So they wait around another day, and now the snowstorm starts to hit, and basically Aaron's buddies were forced to pack up and leave because they just weren't prepared for that kind of weather, and they weren't able to survive properly out there on their own in a huge hellacious snowstorm. His buddies get off the mountain, and over the next 12 to 24 hours, almost 2 feet of snow gets dumped on this mountain. So now they really begin to worry, and they go and they contact the authorities to get started a search and rescue mission. So now the way these mountains are set up, 2 counties were actually involved in the search and rescue. And they included search and rescue teams, helicopters, and scent dogs to try and pick up a scent or locate his tracks. The search team searched for 2 days, and while one of the teams is coming back from the search area, a place that had already been searched, they come across a campfire. And at this campfire location, they found his camelback and his boots, which were neatly stacked right next to the campfire, and also a pack of cigarettes that were in the campfire that was Aaron's brand. And another weird thing that they found was in the campfire, his backpack straps, not his backpack itself, but the straps that you strap the backpack around your front side with, were laying about halfway in the campfire, and they were about halfway burnt. And perhaps the weirdest thing of all, because it had been snowing, there were no tracks to or from this location where the campfire was. No footprints, no trail, no anything. It was as if somebody had just picked Aaron up out of the wilderness and he just vanished. The search teams included 60 individual searchers, 2 helicopters with thermal imaging, and they brought in 20 different canine search and rescue teams to try and pick up a scent or trail or anything about Aaron, and they couldn't find anything. Now, let's fast forward 9 months later. Winter's over, all the snowstorms have passed, and there was a rancher, and the way the crazy mountains are set up is it's mostly surrounded by private property, private ranches, farms, things like that. So 9 months later, a rancher is out just inspecting his farm. He's about a mile away from his ranch, checking on some fences, where he sees that a hunter, had left his backpack. So he wanders over, just thinking a hunter had just left it there, and he picks it up and looks inside of it. He found Aaron's ID, a .44 caliber pistol, some nutrition bars, water, and other basic supplies. And the way he found the backpack was weird, because it was like it was gently placed next to the tree, like somebody had gone out of their way and took care in actually placing this backpack. It hadn't looked like it had been there all winter through the elements. It looked brand new, sitting next to a tree. Close to where they found the backpack, they also find a thermostat, which was Aaron's, and an energy drink that was about half drank, sitting next to the thermostat on a stump. Now this was really weird, because the location they found this thermostat in, you could physically see down the mountain, a ranch, a creek, everything you needed to get help. If he was truly lost in the wilderness, looking and needing help, help was right there, about a mile away. He could see it with his own eyes. Why would he choose to sit there and stare at it from a mile-long distance and sip on an energy drink? So after finding his backpack, these ranchers, they find no trace of Aaron himself, just some of his possessions, his ID, his pistol. Now fast forward 23 months later, almost 2 years later, that same group of ranchers, they were up doing more maintenance on their ranches. They were on horseback going through the trails. And as they're riding, one of them looks over and he spots a skull sitting underneath a tree. And now a weird thing about this was the skull was in almost perfect condition. There was no obvious signs of trauma. It was just sitting there, white, glowing white, like it hadn't been sitting there for almost 2 years in the elements, in the weather. So the ranchers, after finding the skull, the ranchers contact the local authorities, the sheriff's department, and the sheriffs come up to the location, and they end up finding a few of his ribs, his pelvis, and a femur bone. They also found his coat with his cell phone in it, sitting not too far from where the bones were located. They never found his pants, socks, or any other shoes, which was weird, because there was no way that Aaron could have hiked miles barefoot in that terrain. The mountains are full of jagged rocks. There is absolutely no way you can make that trip barefoot. Because if you remember, his boots were already found neatly placed by that campfire location that was a couple miles away. Now the coroner report on his death certificate states that he succumbed to hypothermia and exposure to the elements. And sometimes with hypothermia, there's something that's called paradoxical undressing, where people that are in severe stages of hypothermia, they start to feel like they're burning on the inside, and they mistake the cold for heat, and they start to take clothes off, hoping to try and cool off. But this, of course, just makes things worse and speeds up the hypothermic process. Now, about his boots, it is not uncommon for hunters to carry 2 sets of shoes, because when you're trekking through the wilderness, you do need a pair of heavy boots to really protect your feet. But if you come across an animal and you're going to hunt for game and possibly stalk, it has been known that hunters will switch their shoes. to make it more quiet. They'll carry a lighter pair of shoes so that when they are stalking the animal, that they don't make as much noise. So this could explain why his boots were found a couple miles away. Maybe he came across an elk and he had his bow and it was bow hunting season. Maybe he didn't have a good shot, so he decided to stalk the elk in his other pair of shoes for a couple miles, which could explain why his body ended up miles away from where his boots were found. However, it doesn't explain why he was within a mile of help that he could physically see with his own eyes, why he didn't go one more extra mile to seek help. Instead, he sat there and drank half an energy drink. This is definitely one of the stranger stories I've done that leaves so many questions unanswered. I've tried to wrap my head around all the weird and anomalous parts of this story, but I have no answers. What do you think happened to Aaron? Let me know in the comments below. The story of Aaron Hedges, the well-regarded hunter went missing in the crazy mountains in 2014, highlights the challenges of search and rescue in remote and rugged terrain. Despite the extensive search efforts, the mystery of what happened to Hedges remains unsolved. One of the key lessons from the Aaron Hedges story is the importance of being prepared when venturing into the backcountry. Hedges reportedly became separated from his hunting companions on purpose and was unable to find his way back to the base camp. It's a reminder that even the most experienced outdoorsmen can find themselves in dangerous situations, and that having the right equipment, knowledge, and survival skills can make all the difference between life or death. Another lesson is the importance of prompt reporting in a missing persons case. In Hedges' case, there was a delay in reporting of his disappearance, which may have hampered search efforts. In general, it's crucial to report a missing person as soon as possible, so that search and rescue teams can begin their efforts before crucial evidence is lost or weather conditions worsen. Finally, the Aaron Hedges story underscores the difficulty of the search and rescue operations in remote and rugged terrain. Even with extensive resources and expertise, it can be incredibly challenging to locate a missing person in these areas. It's a reminder of the need for continued investment in search and rescue capabilities and technology, and for the importance of supporting the dedicated professionals who work tirelessly to find missing people and bring them home to their loved ones. If you've enjoyed this content, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe so I can continue to bring you these mysterious stories.